It's been a long time since I did that one, but welcome back, narrators. I'm here as Mo. Welcome to the Narrators Per Possession podcast. The mute button is always the bane of my existence. I am glad after a nice holiday hiatus, we're back here with this podcast. Up front, before I get into any of the housekeeping or the pleasantries, please make sure that you like and subscribe and leave a comment on this fine podcast video. I'm excited to get back because there's a lot of interesting things going on in the NBA. And a lot of interesting things with the Dallas Mavericks today. My guest today, if you're a Dallas Mavericks fan, you know her coverage, you know her content quite well. And we're going to dive in today just the whole, broadly what is going on with the Mavericks. But also, we got to talk about Cooper Flagg. We got to talk about Anthony Davis and where he is today, where he might be tomorrow. And also some other interesting things in this roster as well. So without further ado, I want to welcome to the stage Lauren Gunn. Lauren, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. The mute button is also the bane of my existence, so I'm right there with you. But there is so much going on right now. You and I obviously chatted a little bit already, but it seems like every day is a new day in Mavs land. So I'm kind of like trying to embrace it for the entertainment aspect of it. Obviously, lucky to enjoy the Cooper Flagg of it all, and now the Ryan Nembhard. And even Max Christie, which I'm sure we'll get into all of it. But yeah, you never really know what's coming in terms of news. So it's always kind of like we're at the hold on tight kind of era right now for Mavs basketball.
Yeah, it seems like there's no shortage of roller coaster is probably the best way to describe it, because it seems like it's been a lot of twists and turns in a single calendar year. And I feel that there is no more appropriate way to get this conversation started with really the prologue of the Mavericks front office and the Mavericks ownership. We're now just almost about a month into the firing of former General Manager Nico Harrison by team governor Patrick Dumont. It's just been a tumultuous past 12 months, really. And then the fact that all of this is on the heels of the Dallas Mavericks being the Western Conference champions, a season removed at this point. Feels like that was 5 years ago. What can you sort of surmise, or what takeaways do you have to offer, at least at the top of this organization at this point, where they're going, obviously, and just the general state of that leadership brain trust?
Yeah, I think right now it's sort of at I would describe it as transitional, right? So it's for anyone that did not read the Tim McMahon piece on the state of the Mavs following the Nico Harrison firing, departure, whatever you want to call it, I would really recommend that. I'm not sure how far it got out to other fan bases, but it was a really, really great behind the curtain look at what happened, every single thing beyond the Luka trade that led up to that, and then also kind of where we're at now. And as of right now, it seems that they're sort of taking this, and this is a quote, GM by committee mentality with some of the guys that have been around there for a very long time. There seems like Mark Cuban has a seat back at the table, which could be really interesting. Michael Finley and Matt Riccardi as well, who have also been around for a little while and have a lot of really solid expertise. So right now, I think where things are at, they have this sort of historical voice, especially with Mark Cuban. It's a little unclear how much power Pat Dumont really wants to give, or how much weight he wants to put in someone like Mark Cuban's voice. But as of right now, it's the most he's had in a long time. That is for sure. And so Mark Cuban, when he was kind of at the helm, making all of, or at least the majority of the decisions, having the loudest voice in the room before the ownership change, they were very predictable. You kind of knew, okay, they like these guys. This is how they go about their business. It was fairly predictable. But now it's like, okay, they're sort of back to that, but they're in this position right now where everyone knows this is the last year that they have their pick until 2030. And so they really need to take advantage of that. And I'm not saying that while I am Team Tank, I'm not saying they need to be very selective about every single decision they make, whether that be Kyrie Irving's return, Anthony Davis, dealing him potentially. They need to be selective with which kind of assets they want to acquire, how they want to look at future contract extensions, and also pinpoint, okay, it looks like we want to hold on to Kyrie Irving, but how does this fit in with our plan? And what happens if we bring someone new in at the end of this year, after this GM committee has, I don't want to say expired, but when we need to put someone with a name, with experience, with a resume in that seat? how do we set them up for success with no own draft pick till 2030? What can we do for the next 6 months up until then? And do we put someone in the chair right before the draft, right before free agency? Like that, again, very transitional. It's a very pivotal moment for the franchise right now. And I do think that it's probably best that Mark has a seat back at the table, and that they're going to be able to right this ship by having multiple voices, not, throwing anything out there that's too extreme to try and overcorrect. Because I think that would be the worst thing that they could do.
Sure. In your opinion, how much of the reintroduction or giving Mark Cuban a revised seat at the table, so to speak, how much of that is really about the internal workings of the Mavericks, again, the organizational leadership at this point, contrasted perhaps with, does that just help continue to sort of turn down the temperature on like the PR fiasco of obviously the Luka trade and all the fan disdain about that move?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I think if you look at it from the fan base perspective, a lot of people have a lot of mixed feelings on Mark, because some people blame him for the Luka trade as like a domino effect of, you chose who to sell it to. You chose, and he'll go back and forth and he'll say, well, the NBA didn't let me put, that I could maintain control of basketball operations in the contract, which to me, it's not passing the smell test for me. I don't really understand how someone with his experience could just say the NBA told me that I couldn't do that, and that was the end of that. That doesn't add up in my brain. But now it's sort of like, okay, he needs to be back at the table to have, again, sort of like the historic, here's what the franchise, I know the fans. That is one thing that, like, he's all over Twitter. He knows kind of what the loudest fans and what the fan base is sort of feeling and how much they value loyalty. He's very aligned on that front. And so I think in some regards, it's good. I think in others, it's not as much like a PR, let's get Mark back. I think it's sort of like this is such a dire an extreme situation, having to bounce back from losing Luka, losing everything in the community, like the brand, so much about it, even just from a business perspective, was catered towards him, his personality, his play style. And now you have a completely different identity, and you have a very marketable product with Cooper Flagg and the young core that they're piecing together. But you need an identity, and not just a basketball identity. You need a brand identity. And so I think bringing Mark back into the fold is a part of that. And I really do think that whether fans may have soured on him or have negative feelings towards him, or even members, I'm not even saying that, that members of the organization have sour feelings towards him, but it was reported that there was a lot of internal struggle with the aftermath of where things were at different levels of post-sale, post-Luka trade. Like there was so much turmoil. So I think overall having Mark back at the table is going to do more positive than negative. But I do think that there could still be some caution of like, hey, we can't just say, here's one person's vision, like Mark has all the say, we need to follow what Mark wants. I don't think that they're in that position anymore. And I think now, if there's anything that they learned from last year, it's that we cannot have one person making unilateral decisions with a final sign off at the end of the day, like, whatever, let's keep it. Like, you need to really be thinking through these different scenarios. And so for now, normally I would not be cool with the GM by committee approach, but for now, in this set of circumstances, I think the group that they've assembled, and I think that the way that they're going about it is probably the making the best of a really tough situation. So I'm okay with it for the time being.
It seems like it's just a necessity, given how much of a chaotic transition this whole journey has been, going from the transition of ownership, the front office upheaval of removing Nico Harris. I'm familiar with Michael family, and certainly he's some level of institutional knowledge. And it sounds like now, like the rationale for Mark Cuban returning is it's a crisis situation, and you just need to lean on that institutional knowledge to help stabilize the situation. I know Matt Riccardi, I'm not as familiar with him, and then he's the part of that GM by committee, correct? So I imagine, it's just there needs to be a rapid coalescence of a brain trust to help navigate the franchise through just a massive turnaround. And I should say that the turnaround is not as daunting, perhaps, when you think about this. It just feels like there's a wide open canvas for the direction of where this franchise can go. It's an interesting constraint of not having a draft pick now after this upcoming draft.
Right.
And I think it's a good segue also into just touching a bit on the most recent Mavs game. So they played the Miami Heat Wednesday night, and I watched that game, and honestly, I feel that the record right now does not really paint the complete story of this roster, this Mavericks roster. There are reasons why. I'm sure they're 8 they are 8 and 15 now, or no, let me get that correct. They are
they're 8
and 15. Make sure I got that right. So it's an 8 and 15 roster, but they took on Miami Heat right now, which that organization itself has had a resurgent transformation this season. All the stories have been about how Miami Heat is sort of revolutionizing basketball offense, so to speak, by not running any pick and roll, and they're just going all in on pace. At the same time, they're highly ranked defense as well. I was impressed by the fact that the Mavericks were able to take it to the Heat and get that win, even though it was an uneven game at times. Did you watch the game first?
I did.
If you didn't, okay.
Yeah, I did. It's interesting, or like what you said about the record not telling the full story. I agree with that completely. It almost seems like these last 4 games with Ryan, this is not meant to be an overreaction to Ryan Nembhard, but this last 4 games with Ryan at the point guard and Max Christie has now secured that starting spot. That has been going on for a little bit longer than 4 games, but it finally feels like there's some continuity with the starting lineup of, okay, we've had this desperate need for a pass first facilitator, and oh my God, we actually have one. Like, the fans screaming from the rooftops to give this dude a chance, because as much as, we love Brandon Williams, we love Jaden Hardy, who I think most would at this point not even consider a point guard, but at D'Angelo Russell, like there's so much scoring instinct there. There's not as much patience and poise. And so while you're not going to expect that from someone like a rookie, or let alone an undrafted rookie on a 2-way contract, when you finally start to see it of, okay, here's what this team could look like, and we're not just waiting for Kyrie to get back, you're seeing the patience, the poise, the ball movement. That I feel like now is finally where it's like, okay, this is in practice as close to the ideal version of, at least with this current group with Anthony Davis, what we want to see, the role we want to see Cooper Flagg in, the role we want to see Max Christie and PJ when he's out there, battling that injury, that kind of freak accident injury, and then obviously Daniel Gafford as well. So while they have guys coming in and out of the lineup, the Ryan Nembhard addition to the starting lineup, the Max Christie he's secured that spot, Clay coming off the bench, it almost feels like the rotation is finally being solidified. And I will give Coach Kidd a lot of credit that Ryan at the starting point guard spot, Clay coming off the bench is kind of that boost in the second unit. It's almost like people are just naturally falling into slots. And I've been pleased to see them make those adjustments more earlier than later, because I was like, please tell me please tell me that I'm not going to have to wait until 2026 for Ryan Nembhard to play meaningful basketball. And so I'm very pleased that we're here. And I think now is kind of where this assessment period should really start. Again, I'm still Team Tank, but I think that they really need to focus on, okay, how can we, because I'm a big proponent of Max Christie being a big part of this, and so a big part of the future plans. And so I think right now what you're starting to see specifically in that Miami game, with Nembhard controlling the pace, controlling the speed, because like you mentioned, the team is very solid defensively, but also very solid in their pace of play. And so now we're really starting to see Anthony Davis, be fed the ball in his spots, not having to be at the top of the key as the offensive initiator. He's getting the ball in the post. He's getting the ball in the paint. And then Coop, he's getting the ball off the dribble. He's getting to initiate and not have to initiate the entire offense. He's targeting mismatch. And so I feel like now with the Miami game, and I feel like those 4 games where Nembhard was initiated into the starting lineup is where we're really starting to see how their offense works, the pace, The defense, I'm curious if that's going to fall off a little bit with Nembhard at the point guard, but I feel like now is their best identity for the time being.
Yes, and Nembhard, we all know Andrew Nembhard, but Ryan Nembhard, like, I was surprised. I was not expecting that level of a performance from Ryan Nembhard in that Wednesday night game against the Heat. He starts. He's bringing 15 points, 13 assists. Desperately, like, and I want to touch on this a bit as well. One of the things that struck me, or impressed upon me watching the Mavericks, I just didn't see a lot of easy scoring for them, even though, Nembhard was able to generate as many assists. And there's, I believe you're hitting on something about, what hopefully a near-term focus is that Jason Kidd is trying to pull together and bring out of this roster is I just don't see the cohesion yet, even though they did win that game. And one of the things that I did some digging. If you go to NBA.com, just a simple stat, like where the Mavericks rank right now in terms of passing, either passes made or pass received. The Mavericks are 25th ranked in that right now. They average 277. What we got here? 277.8 passes per game. That is like bottom ranked. I mean, for context, the top of that is no surprises the Golden State Warriors. I mean, they pass the ball the most. But just the level of ball movement, that just seems like a ripe opportunity to help lift up what is, compared to the defense right now, the Mavericks are 5th ranked in terms of defensive efficiency. They are bottom ranked in offensive efficiency right now. And it's just, there needs to be more something of getting that team on the same page, and hopefully Max, you mentioned Max Trixie, but also Ryan Nembhard as well. Just like maybe that's the catalyst to start turning around their offensive performance.
Yeah, it definitely seems that way. It really does seem like where they were at, like those first, God, what would it have been? The first like 20 or so games where they had no answer for at the facilitator spot specifically. The lack of ball movement and the lack of flow, it was to the point where I was like, it's hard for me to watch this. There's so much to be excited about of like, okay, what are we going to see from Anthony Davis, or what are we going to see from Cooper Flagg, or okay, Max is starting now, PJ's starting like, there's so much that was on paper, like, let's see it. Oh, this is a good matchup. But then you would see 48 minutes of no ball movement. And it's like, I don't even care how good the defense is. You can't even get a good shot. It was horribly frustrating. And in a weird way, kind of hindsight 2020, it might have been like the perfect sort of like, if we already had a point guard, if Kyrie was healthy, I don't know that we would be getting these opportunities to see what a gem Ryan Nembhard is. And so you kind of like, right now I'm trying to just take the good with Ryan Nembhard and see what they can do. But what I notice about him when he's out there is that in the like Mavs being very high level of pace, when he gets the ball in transition, not only let me rewind. When we get a rebound, first however many games, automatically you're giving it to Cooper, or you're giving it Ryan Nembhard wasn't out there, but now you can see the guys looking for Nembhard. You can see Cooper getting the ball, or somebody passes it to him, he passes it over to Nembhard, or he gets the rebound. And sometimes he'll take it, but it's the fact that you can see the trust, you can see the patience, and you can see the poise, and how he, Nembhard isn't just looking for the open guy. He's waiting for the strings of the defense to pull to be completely out of position, to where now they can't even get the guy in the corner on this cross court pass. They're not even in position to rotate and double AD in the post. Like it's the confidence to make the tough pass, but then also the ability to put it in either in the shooter's pocket or right where they need, but then also the patience to let the play develop. And so I can't stress it enough, seeing kind of the way in the short term that they've been able to evolve, because they have so many other veteran high-level players with different experience, whether it be AD, Najee, Clay, Gafford, when he's available. Like, they've got these guys that have been around, and so they can pick things up quick. And so to have a guard step in there, the most important, in my opinion, the most important position when it comes to decision making and being able to put something together to be that facilitator. If you don't have that, like, I'm sure we'll talk about the Bulls here in a minute, but like if you don't have someone that can make those decisions and make those reads, it is so tremendously difficult. And so it's been a nice change of pace recently, to say the least.
I have to imagine so. I would be remiss if we didn't talk about, of course, the headlining rookie on this roster right now, Cooper Flagg. Going back to Wednesday's game, the question that was top of mind for me to ask you is, what have been your impressions of Cooper Flagg's evolution to NBA defense? Because he did get in foul trouble, which was interesting. And, from the minutes of when I watched him in his college career at Duke, it was always his defense that popped way more off the screen to me than his offense. And that's not to say that he doesn't have offensive impact to deliver, but it just, the way he defends is something that, like, that to me is what his calling card is more than anything. And the Mavericks already being a top 10 defense, given, only 8 games of Anthony Davis on the record at this point, I feel like that probably you have to give some credit to Flagg in that regard. This is my outside observation.
Yeah. Without a doubt. I think, from day one, it was so exciting to see his fearlessness. Like he will go against anybody. And I want to get to the Milwaukee game in a minute, because there was a pivotal moment that I think all of Mavs Twitter, who watches every single game and was watching that game, was like, this is the game where Cooper was like, yeah, I deserve to be here. And so not that he's short on confidence by any means, but those first couple of games, you could see him like have these moments where he hesitated on a shot and then he passed. There was there was the game tying shot against New Orleans that he missed, but then a couple games after that, he had a 3 that he ended up passing off after just slightly hesitating. And it was like, I think it was against the Grizzlies. Or it might have been that other game against Miami. My memory is failing me. But there was a brief moment where you saw him on the offensive end hesitate and give up a game-tying shot after he had just missed that other one. And you could immediately see, not only did he pass it, the person who got it, I want to say it was Najee, it was PJ. It was PJ. It was against Memphis. PJ shot it, was very crowded shot, and he missed it. The game was over, and you could immediately see Cooper knowing that he should have taken that shot. And so to see him on a game-to-game basis truly improve on his decision-making and his processing and with very immediate processing has been insane. And so on day one, I feel like he really did have that defensively. As far as like the fouling goes, it almost takes me back to Derek Lively's rookie year, where it's like your defensive capabilities, your ability to move your feet, your ability to make reads is naturally going to have a slight adjustment to the timing of the NBA. But as far as your capabilities and your body and your physical tools that you have, it's already there. So you just have to let everything kind of fall into pace. And I feel like the same has been said for Cooper, although obviously different position, different things that they've got going on. But with Cooper, you can see the reads and the floor is already very high with how he processes defensively and where he comes in as the help, not even a help side blocker, but like sort of this weak side free safety like player where you forget he's there and all of a sudden he's taking your shot from behind. It's pretty unbelievable to watch, because Mavs have not had too many players like that over the history of the franchise. But so the information processing on the defensive level has been pretty high from the beginning, but even just in 2 months, what we've seen on the offensive end, again, don't want to overreact, don't want to kick out the homer bias, but it's been very, very exciting to see. And it's going back to that Milwaukee game, there was a play at the end of the game where he got the ball or he got past the ball on the right wing, and he went straight at Giannis to finish over him in a key possession of the game. He went straight at him. And I think everybody watching that play, seeing him catch the ball, he would have had a wide open 3. Obviously, most people know he's not the greatest shooter at the moment for now, but he takes that ball, doesn't even hesitate, and is like, I'm going straight at Giannis. And that, I believe he ended up going to the free throw line. And that was a huge moment of the game, because it's like, this dude is not, he's not looking at, I'm going against a weak or like a bench player and a bench player right now at the end of this game. I'm going against Giannis, and I'm not even going to hesitate. And so seeing those moments from him, seeing his processing, his studying, it's been unbelievable. Jason Kidd had a moment where he kind of like covered his mouth talking to Cooper. Obviously, I have no idea what he said, but I'm like convinced that he told him, you need to put the ball on the ground and you need to go straight to the basket because you're the guy. It's time to go be the guy. And so we're seeing that night to night basis. It's been very exciting. Obviously, I could go on about it all day, but I'll spare you.
Yeah. Well, I imagine what you talk about his processing of the game and how he's seeing it, and certainly that is so critical to NBA defense. I also imagine it's certainly helping Cooper Flagg now that Anthony Davis is back, because I mean, Anthony Davis is an all NBA defender. Just having that tandem is a good segue into Anthony Davis. He looked solid in the game Wednesday against the Heat, and he looks like he's back to all-star shape. I mean, availability and things like that, that's unfortunately always going to be part of his story, but he looks solid, at least from what I saw Wednesday. He's got 8 games under his belt. He's also become a very popular conversation piece as we're now getting into the informal NBA trade season. December 15th is 10 days away. I am a Bulls fan, and I had the privilege, I suppose, of my timeline exploding with a lot of Anthony Davis conversation because of a report from ESPN's Jamal Collier, where he reported that the Chicago Bulls front office has had internal discussions about Anthony Davis. It's interesting because obviously that's an internal discussion. I'm of the opinion that, frankly, that kind of story leaking has already surrendered trade negotiation leverage from the Bulls' perspective. So I'll be interested to see how it goes if they truly pursue that. From your point of view, from a Dallas Mavericks point of view, what are your thoughts as you start to hear trade rumors about Anthony Davis? And I suppose the tangential question to that as well is, what is the ideal return for Anthony Davis if he is traded by the Mavs this season? And the timing, perhaps, like, is that a February trade that the Mavs do, or is that a July trade?
Yeah, that's a great question. I am of the opinion that it would be most wise to do that in February, to go ahead and just move forward in February, because if you don't, then what are you doing? Are you trying? You don't want to sit him and have him lose all his value and then deal with it in July. So is he playing and you're trying to make the play in, and then your last draft pick is pick 13, 14, and that's if they can even make some significant headway from where they're at right now. And so to me, that is like a misaligned, I'm half in on this, I'm half in on future, I'm half out. And to me, that is the worst place to be. And so I'm a little fearful that could end up being like, well, we don't love the offers. And it's interesting that you talk about leverage, about that report coming out, because for me, when I look at this situation, I'm like, Anthony Davis we'll see what happens with Giannis, but he could be the top talent available on the trade deadline. If not top 3, without a doubt, top 2 probably, but you never know. With LeBron anyway. So with AD, I think you have to be aware of, yes, you have this great talent, but it was reported that the rest of the league was circling like vultures when Nico got fired, and because everyone knew that AD was Nico's guy. And so now that he's gone, now that Tim McMahon is reporting that the Mavs are interested in shifting their focus on Cooper Flagg and that, where does that leave us? And so for me, I am not of the opinion that you can go out there and shoot for the stars on an Anthony Davis return, but I am of the opinion that you need to trade him. And I think it's in his best interest, and I think it's in the organization's best interest. And so for me to kind of get to your other question about what an ideal return is, I think it's fair to target a short-term, large contract to get you to the value, to get you to the dollar value, like a salary dump situation. A solid young prospect. It doesn't need to be the premier young prospect, but it needs to be someone, not that, oh, maybe, like, it needs to be someone that has a pretty surefire upward trajectory. They don't need to turn into a superstar, but it can't be like never mind, I'm not going to take a shot, but it needs to be someone with some decent upside. And then, in my opinion, there needs to be at minimum 1 first-round pick. And then where the real conversation to me starts to take place is, who's that young prospect? Are they up here? Are they here? And so how far out are we willing to go with the first-round pick? Because to me, if it's like, oh, we're not willing to get rid of, Kobe White, or if we're talking like, let's say if we're talking like Kobe White, or a couple months ago, I would have said Jaden Ivey. That has changed a lot. But if we're talking about certain guys out there, like, are we looking at a first round pick towards the end of, or like 2030, 2028, 2029? Or are we talking about this year? Because if you're going to do a salary dump and you're going to take a young player back that is good, is not great, then to me, you need to be getting a more recent first round pick. We don't need to be kicking the can down the road for forever. And so to me, I think that there are enough teams out there that provide that optionality for them. And I think that there are also enough teams right now, whether it be Detroit with Jaden Ivey, who is in a very specific contract situation, the Pacers with Benedict Mathurin, who we'll see what happens there. A lot of questions, but again, a contract sort of dilemma there, or the Bulls with Kobe White and a contract dilemma there. Those are the situations at minimum that I'm sort of looking at of like, would I be thrilled if they traded Anthony Davis to the Pistons where the package was like the premier young asset was Jaden Ivey? At this point, no. At this point, I think you need to ask for more than that. With the Bulls, to me, it kind of only starts and ends with Kobe White as that young guy. There's not really another name there that I think for the Mavs makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, I especially, now just sort of processing, absorbing what we just talked about with the Mavericks offense, right, and the ball movement issue. Kobe White would do a lot to turn that whole situation around.
Sure.
I have been impressed with Kobe White's trajectory over the last 2 or 3 seasons. Kobe White, I mean, the moment for pause for most people, and it's a fair criticism. Kobe White's always going to be sort of a defensively constrained player. He's not going to necessarily give you a ton of resistance on the defense side. So, I mean, if you have him, you really need to have him surrounded by solid defenders to where you're ideally keeping Kobe on the back line. You're not really allowing him to get pulled into action.
Right.
And I think he can be a serviceable team defender when he's in back line. He can rotate. He's not getting put into the action. That's the key thing with him. But his ball movement is you can't deny the impact of it at this point. Like he can, and where he, I believe, transformed himself to where he started getting his most improved player recognition was the ball movement, but also just becoming much more, versatile in terms of how he scored. He grew up from being a shooter into a scorer, and figure out ways to start manipulating defenses, getting downhill. Those are valuable things. And honestly, I would love to see Kobe in a Mavs uniform as I'm thinking about this now, because going back to that Wednesday game, I had jotted down a note for myself of like, dribble drive. Who's getting the paint touches on this Mavericks offense right now? Kobe would help that tremendously. Yeah,
I think his play style, I just think he would be so... he fits right into kind of the same, I don't want to say the same thing that they've always done. I don't want to diminish his game in that way. But what you were saying a second ago about potentially defensive limitations, like the Mavs at the point guard spot have been high level offense, high level processing, scoring capabilities, raise the floor, and the defense will insulate you. We'll figure it out. We'll get the guys on the wing. We now have guys in the paint. And even if that means moving off of Anthony Davis, and yes, there are question marks with Derek Lively, which is another big caveat to all of this, but you get yourself a high pick. Looks like that would probably be a wing or a big, just looking at the draft class. Or Moussa Cisse, who some people might laugh at that, but another guy on a two-way contract who has, again, with the Derek Lively injuries, with the Anthony Davis and Daniel Gafford, in the time that he's gotten out there, he's another guy that I think that they would really like to get on a standard contract because of the way he comes in and plays. There's a lot of similarities with Daniel Gafford, the way he plays. So I think the Mavs feel like they have options to insulate guys, but what they don't have right now is that high level. I know I've said it a million times, but the high level processing as a facilitator. And of course, it's like, you could take a step back and be like, okay, well, Ryan Nembhard, what does that mean for Ryan Nembhard? But it's like, you can't you can't go about things that way of like, oh, we can't go out. We're going to pass on someone like Kobe White because of that is a horrible. You're not in a position to be saying things like that. And so for me, I'm like, look, if sounds like they want to hang on to Kyrie, you can go get Kobe White. And Kobe White is a very different than Ryan Nembhard. They have very different games. And so to me, there's absolutely room for all of those guys to coexist. And I think having someone like Max Christie, having someone like Cooper Flagg on the wing, whoever you may get in the draft, you could have so much defensive versatility, even or more so than you already do, which is a lot, again, relative to the Mavs historically. This era right now is very constructed around defensive versatility. And so Cooper being at the core of that, we'll see what happens with Derek Lively in the long term, but Cooper being at the core of that, you need to balance that out offensively. And so someone like Kobe White, again, someone that sure, there's a little bit of injury history there, some decent injury history there, but I really do think that I really like him as a player for the identity of the Mavs, for their system, for the way that they play offensively. I think he would slot in fairly seamlessly, and I don't worry about how that would affect Ryan Nembhard. I think Kobe White would be a fantastic fit with Max Christie, who could also help with the defensive insulation there. And yeah, I think to me, it makes a lot of sense. I also hear the people who are like, the Chicago link is nothing more than like a leverage play for Anthony Davis and his agents or whatever. I've heard that, but I think the Mavericks are in a situation right now where they can't afford to keep kicking the can down the road because this is the year. If you had a pick next year, there was still uncertainty, maybe I could hear more leeway on this conversation. But to me, you can't go trade for another veteran player. So you have to isolate the guys who have shown upside, who are in the final year of their contract, who are in between on the negotiations. That's what you need to be targeting. And to me, that makes the Bulls a prime target.
I would agree. The Bulls front office is generally a very close to the vest, tight-lipped organization. So when things leak out about their inner workings, I don't usually disregard that. So
yeah.
I'm of the opinion that there's high interest in making that move happen. And I also base that just on the track record of how this front office have made their moves and kind of reading between the lines of how they come together. Generally, when the Bulls do make a trade, because they don't trade all that often, it just seems to be a very myopic way they go about it, where it's like, oh, this is our guy, and this is just what we're going to do. We're not going to really try to like optimize the value we get back in the deal. We just want this guy, and whatever else, we don't care about that. We get single guys, and we play a style of play. I'm being somewhat tongue-in-cheek because I also don't really agree with much of a front office's philosophy, to be perfectly blunt.
Well, but, I did want to ask you what your thoughts are on like where things, specifically with Anthony Davis and the Bulls, if you're of the opinion that there may be such an interest at potentially adding an all NBA player at a quote low discounted price. If you think that that's something that they're so anxious to do specifically with someone like Anthony Davis, who addresses some need that Chicago has had for a little while now, so much so that they could potentially be like over aggressive. And I'm not saying like willing to throw the farm for Anthony Davis, but like in terms of negotiating and making certain assets available, could you like, where do you gauge traditionally how they are typically go about sometimes prioritizing veterans as opposed to the long-term development with guys, someone like, and what I'm really getting at here is Matas Buzelis, who, whether his leap this year has been underwhelming or wherever you land on that, where do you gauge him and their long-term plans?
It's so I can say, so I've had two guests from the Bulls media beat, Drew Stevens from the Bigs, friend of the podcast. Then also, actually, my last guest was Will Gottlieb from CHGO.
Oh, yeah.
Also on the Bulls beat. By all accounts, from anything that's been publicly reported, and certainly from the Bulls' direct sort of media pressers with the beat, Maz is for sure part of the long-term plan and vision. It would be quite surprising, quite shocking if somehow Mas Buzelis ended up in serious trade negotiations.
Yeah.
And I'll also add, this is an emerging thing. I'm curious, like, I get the sense it's probably not as big of a story nationally, but at least like purely from Bulls Nation, Bulls Twitter right now, there's been a minor storm about there's this report from the gentleman's name is Lou Canellis, and some people may not be familiar with Lou Canellis. I'm of the Dynasty Bulls vintage. I know Lou Canellis quite well because he was the sideline reporter during the Dynasty years of the Bulls. He's not really an everyday NBA person anymore, but he did go on a local Chicago radio, and he reported that Giannis Antetokounmpo was interested in exploring the Bulls' as a trade option, and the Bulls had no interest in that because they wanted to preserve their quote-unquote young core. And actually, I should say paraphrase. I'm going to paraphrase him. I can't remember if he directly said that. However, it's worth noting because, again, like some people will probably dismiss that report from Lou Canellis because, again, he's not an everyday NBA person. However, he's been in the business for quite some time. I'm not going to totally dismiss that. Also, the interesting nuance in there, Lou Canellis is also a restaurateur in Chicago, and he has hosted Giannis in his restaurant in the past before. So, I mean, we live in this era where constantly people get on the tweet machine and say, "So my sources."
Yeah, right.
I mean, he knows Giannis. You can't dismiss that.
You can't always. I think I do. I agree. I do. I'm a big believer of that, specifically because there have been, like, actually, funny enough, Bulls related, like, there was a point in time where I got a random piece of information from Lauri Markkanen's agent back when all of that was going on. And it's like, that was at a time where, like, I was, and have not really been someone that's like, oh, I've got all these sources, because it's not real. But you just never know who's going to hear something or you just never know. And at that time, the Mavs were interested in Lauri Markkanen, and there were significant trade conversations going on. And so to get a piece of information from as close to the source as you could at that time was, like, unexpected and was incredibly, like, useful. And so to me, it's important to take things with a grain of salt, but you also shouldn't be so quick to be like, I've never seen that guy, I'm brushing it off. Because sometimes you can put some tea leaves together and be like, well, what does that mean? And so I did catch that report, and I do follow a handful of Bulls accounts because the Bulls have had some guys on the roster that I've been wanting on the Mavs for a long time. I saw the report and I saw some of the reactions to it. And the only thing, like, let's assume, the report is 100% accurate, just for discussion's sake. In my mind, I could see, like, I think that there's a world, what I'm getting at is I think that there's a world in which I don't think anybody would ever say, like, I don't want Giannis Antetokounmpo, but I could see a world in which an organization says, okay, what would it cost to bring in someone like Giannis versus we already have these conversations going on for Anthony Davis, and we see how, like, sorry, Mavs fans, but little that would cost compared to someone like Giannis. And to me, I think there's a way where it could almost be like for someone like AK, who is, like, needs a win, which, well, anyway, I think, I think you could make the case of let's get off of some of our expiring contracts one of our young players who we have already decided we don't want to pay, above this amount or for this many years or with this stipulation or clause or whatever, and address a need, get a big name in here, get some more fans and seats. Not that I think Chicago has any trouble with that, but let's not offer up the farm. Let's do this because I think we have young pieces. This fits our identity. AD, hometown name. I would be curious, what that report would look like, or what, let's say that even that hypothetical conversation or a real conversation that happened, what their response could have been if some of this AD to Chicago stuff had never even been out there, or like AD was strongly being linked to another team, whether it be Detroit, Indiana, Boston, whoever. So to me, I don't want to say like, oh yeah, the Chicago Bulls shot down Giannis without even considering it. I just think that there is a lot of smoke around this AD situation, and there should be something to be said about look the Mavs with Kyrie. With how that all came to be, there's something to be said about sometimes you can roll the dice and say, you know what, this might be a risky call, but that's how we're getting this discount. And this could be what takes us to that next level. And I could see a world in which the Bulls regime can attach themselves to that idea rather than saying, let's go full risk and send every asset we have to go get someone like Giannis. So it's hard. I don't want to say like, oh, you should turn down Giannis. Are you crazy?
Yeah. And you know, the time is actually like it's just an interesting timing of that report emerging, because also with what Luke Nels mentioned, this was an apparently an off season or summertime sort of chronology of that sort of conversation. So there's certainly a plausible premise there where Bull said, nah, I'm good. I'm just hypothesizing, right? Like maybe it's like, nah, I'm good. And they're not going to disclose why they're good. It's because, we're going to figure out this way to get Anthony Davis. And again, I have no reason to not believe that there is some level of serious strategizing that the Bulls front office is attempting to acquire Anthony Davis. Obviously, we talked about the Jamal Collier piece from ESPN. There's also, I felt like this kind of flew under the radar as well when who was it? John Wall on that podcast clip of John Wall just casually kind of tossing out that, I've heard AD wants to go back to Chicago. This is like,
right.
There's the relationship element to the NBA where like I believe it's useful to sort of like use that as a framing or a filter for this, because John Wall represented by Clutch Sports Group, Anthony Davis represented by Clutch Sports Group. I don't discount that. Like, it's not necessarily like bona fide correlation, but it's certainly like within the realm of possibilities that why would John Wall have heard AD say that?
Right. Yeah. I think things are just, it's a very, very small circle. Like it's there are so many things that someone will have, be a part of a major report, or this person affiliated with this agency, exactly what you're talking about. Like, I think it's very plausible to think, okay, maybe John Wall was having dinner with someone who had just had dinner with Anthony Davis. Or there are so many scenarios of like, if there's a link like an agent, that's a pretty significant link. And so, you can't, I don't think you can always just be like, oh, this person that said that, do you have like a text from that person, or did you just hear it from their mouth? I don't think that there are so many scenarios where these guys find themselves at the same place, or they're talking to the same person, or they're on a trip with a group where somebody's there and then somebody's a leak, or and so it really is so small. And so to me, sometimes I think there can be a grain of salt when former players say stuff, but you just can't discount it. And because these things, if a former player is going to say it, it's going to pick up smoke. You know what I'm saying? And so John Wall says that there's already been conversations ongoing with AD, and then the Chicago stuff. So to me, if you hear it continuously, there's a lot of smoke. If you don't, maybe not. So to me, that the AD Chicago thing now, I don't know if a team's going to come out of nowhere and say, here's what we're offering for AD, take it or leave it, and the Mavs take it, because again, they're in a pretty dire spot. And that's where someone out of nowhere that you didn't see coming comes into play. But as of right now, kind of does seem like Chicago, there's a lot there especially with that Portland pick. Like, I think that's something that Chicago internally could value I don't want to say like very like low, but probably has a lot lower value than their own pick in this draft, because they have control over it, And so I think for Dallas, like having a second pick in this draft, that could be incredibly valuable for them, And so I think that I think that's a perfect example of an asset internally for one organization that could be here relative to the rest of their draft assets. Whereas a team like Dallas, who's in a pretty tough spot draft wise, could be like, this is our chance to get 2 picks in this draft, to have this timeline to address, Derek Lively insurance or whatever the case may be. And so I think that's why Chicago again, we talked about Kobe White and the contract situation there as well, and the fit and the play style. To me, there's just so much on paper that aligns them.
Yes, and I will say from my observation of the transaction history throughout this entire Arturas Karnisovas regime, I'm of the belief that the Chicago Bulls front office actively does not value draft capital. You've seen it repeatedly in the picks they've sent out, and like 2 back-to-back straight up player trades, no draft capital. People, this is a lightning rod thing, but I'm never going to waver on this. The Alex Caruso for Josh Giddey deal is objectively a horrible trade. Just full stop. It's a horrible trade because like Caruso's value has been proven, and it was already a place where it commanded draft capital. Whether or not you had hopes and expectations about upside, that just doesn't justify it. And then at the same time, if you read if you connect the dots of the whole sequence of what the Bulls did with Lonzo Ball, there were reports that there was an offer out there where the Bulls could have received the first round draft pick for Lonzo Ball.
Right.
What did they do? They decided to extend him only to go trade for Isaac Okoro, which I'm to be honest, I have not been a fan of that move so far. I've not really been a fan of anything I've seen Isaac Okoro do for the Bulls yet. Maybe things will change. He's obviously injured and he can come back, but I don't see that as an impactful transaction the Bulls have done. But this is like really underscoring that the Bulls would rather have Isaac Okoro than a first round draft pick. I'm just being honest.
To me, that sums it all up right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that to me is why I'm like, Dallas, you need to go for Chicago because they don't care about picks. And like, I think there's so much for maybe everyone to get exactly what they want here in this scenario, which I don't think is going to be the case if you try to go negotiate with Detroit or even Indiana. So I think Chicago, there could be like oh my God, for all the reasons that we've already discussed, but now specifically with the draft picks, this resolves your problem. This resolves our problem. And I also think, while I do not want to touch Patrick Williams with a 10-foot pole, I am curious if there's any world in which Chicago's like, I'm so done with Patrick Williams. Anyone take him if we can include him to be one of the larger salaries in this trade just to get off of him as the bigger piece and retain, whether it be Herter or someone that they would prefer to take over him or to keep over Patrick Williams. I think that opens up the opportunity for Dallas to be like, hey, this is where we really need like maybe both of your first round picks this year. And for me, the scenario where they get 1 first round pick this year or Kobe White, to me, that is realistic. And I'm good with that. Kobe White. But if it's Patrick Williams in there, or if it's Pat is the Mavs missing piece. Oh God, don't say it.
Alonzo, yeah.
And you know what? If they can convince, if they are willing to part with 2 first round picks, like, because unfortunately that's where I think the Mavs have backed themselves into a corner with, because whoever trades for Anthony Davis, like, that contract is no joke. And so you can talk about the fit, the talent, and that's all true. But like, that contract, there is value involved of now our future and how we have to manipulate our own books with guys that we already have. That creates a lot of hurdles or upcoming challenges. And so there's value in that as well. And so for me, I'm like, well, you can get ahead of that if you want to move off of Patrick Williams, but to do that, you're going to have to part with significant draft capital. And I think if you're Dallas, like, again, if I see Patrick Williams in that trade, I'm not going to be very happy. But if I see multiple first round picks in the short term, I can get on board with that, because I think the Mavs are shifting them. Like, Cooper Flagg's on his rookie deal. Ryan Nembhard's going to be on a multi-year standard contract. Like, you're kind of getting towards that point where you can take on, some financial, to help course correct on the draft situation. So I think there's a world, my ideal situation would be expiring salary, Kobe White, multiple first round picks, because I don't even think I don't think that's on the table. But again, this last year has taught me to never say never. So while I don't think he's on the table, if they can somehow get Kobe White expiring contracts and multiple first-round picks, I think that would be phenomenal work by Dallas. But I just don't know that they have enough leverage right now to warrant all of those assets from Chicago.
Yeah. For what it's worth, I will put it, I mean, for context, Patrick Williams almost was instantaneously made available in the trade market. Last season, so in 24-25 season, he comes in after he's received his restricted free agency extension. A number that, is going to really be one of the damning hallmarks of Arturas Karnisovas's time as Bulls Bulls front office head. Drafting him is one thing, but to extend him for 5 years at $18 million a year, and then almost instantly say, "Oh, I got buyer's remorse. He's available in trade." So, like, the reports came out just about a year ago at this time. So I say all that, like, I would imagine the Bulls would still be interested in trading him if there were a real trade market for him. There probably is not, and won't be unless, to your point, two first-round draft picks are going to be attached to him. So, unfortunately, Patrick Williams is a salary filler, or a contract that they're just going to have to eat.
Right, which is why I think this provides such a unique opportunity for both teams, because I think if you're the Mavericks, like right now, you're right up there against that second apron. Like you're dealing with second apron issues, set to pay what is it, like over $30 million in tax this year. So, like, this record, this product does not justify that. So to me, you have to make a move. And that can't be trading Caleb Williams for something, or I'm sorry, Caleb Martin. My mind is still traumatized by the thought of Patrick Williams. But I think you need to move a little bit more money than a Caleb Martin, and I at this point I don't think you can move Daniel Gafford, whether you move AD or not. I don't think you are in a position to be able to move Daniel Gafford, and so strictly because of Derek Lively and the uncertainty around his situation. So again, we're right back at Anthony Davis. You have to decide what your priorities are. Is it righting the ship draft wise? Is it contract flexibility, all expiring deals, and one young player that we really like? We don't care what the perception is. We love him. We think he's our guy, whatever the case may be. I think there's so many scenarios where it's like, we're not going to be privy to those conversations until a decision has been made and a trade has closed. And at that point, it's going to be like, well, and to me, that's why it's like, you can't expect a premier young asset for someone like Anthony Davis, in my opinion, but you can expect a solid, reliable, person to bring in and continue to develop and get that draft capital. And because in my mind, Anthony Davis is not, like, there's significant risk with Anthony Davis. That's how I think you can justify someone else getting off of their own situation that has gone awry, whatever that case may be. And for a team like Indiana, or even probably Detroit is a better example, a contract negotiations gone wrong. Like, that's a disaster, not disaster, that's a strong word, but like a hurdle that they could get over. And so I think it's going to be about which team has something that they need to resolve in the short term where we can help each other. Not just, oh, let me trade for Anthony Davis, the talent. I think it's going to be about problem solving. And that's where I think who's going to be more willing to, all right, we'll part with this because we're ready to be done with this. Let's go. And I think that's where Chicago is. I think there's more pressure on Chicago than there certainly is on Indiana, than there certainly is on Detroit. Definitely is on Boston. I don't like the Boston one. And then I've seen some of the Golden State stuff, and that is very complex contract wise. So I don't really consider Golden State to be an option. So just to name a few, but I think Chicago, there's a lot of wiggle room there.
There's an additional dynamic I would also add to the Chicago and the Anthony Davis connection, and something that it was actually one of the first things really when I saw that clip of John Wall mention, oh, I've heard AD wants to go back to Chicago. The first thing I really thought of was the actual backstory that emerged about how the Luka trade happened, right? With Anthony Davis and Nico Harrison having their connection from Nike. Mm-hmm. The general manager of Chicago Bulls is Mark Eversley, who also has a history as a former Nike employee. And I do think about that. I have no insight in that, but I'm looking at the variables in play.
Yeah, 100%.
So I believe that's something that's worth taking in consideration as well. If it happens, I believe it becomes more about the strength of whatever existing relationship potentially is there between Mark Eversley and Anthony Davis, potentially more than like what is the Bulls' motivations or goals, because they're generally like not, they don't talk about things in that way in terms of direction.
Mm-hmm.
They're very ambiguous. They're very fluffy, and probably shouldn't be that pejorative, but I can't fully divorce my Bulls fandom when I think about like what is this front office doing. They're not really trying to pursue much in terms of accomplishment. So something like, oh, me, Mark Eversley, I have this relationship with Anthony Davis. Let me bring him in, similar to how I brought in DeMar DeRozan. Like that's a playbook they've already run before. Like I would not be surprised to see them go down that path, because a lot of what also has traditionally fueled the Bulls as an organization is, oh, look at this big new quote unquote star,
shiny exactly
star that we get to like have all this marketing around, and debatable to like how much left is in the tank. Shout out Dwayne Wade.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Oh god, there's a flashback.
So it's the Anthony Davis thing is going to be interesting, and I don't believe there's a 0% chance of Anthony Davis not being in Chicago.
In a Bulls jersey.
Yeah, in Bulls jersey.
Yeah,
it feels like there's too many. There's like, I put it like this. I think we've been in the Anthony Davis Chicago Bulls tornado watch for some time. And I'm just waiting for the cloud to come down.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to sum it up. I really do, because right now it's kind of like there's also been conversation about like what is the next. I believe I saw Melo talking about it. What's the next step or the next era for Anthony Davis's career? Because I don't think that there's anyone that thinks it's in Dallas at this point. So what does that look like for him legacy wise? And so to me, it's like, okay, that's a really interesting conversation, because you could have a completely different answer, like where you end up. And right now, I think while a lot of people have questions about Chicago, they have a guard spot, they have somebody at the guard spot, they've got intriguing young prospects, like they're trying to put something together. It's not like, the linking to, and sorry, this is not a stray, but like Charlotte, he wouldn't be like, if you send him to Charlotte, it's like, well, Charlotte doesn't even know what direction they're going in right now. So Chicago, what they're trying to do. And like for all the links that you're mentioning, again, on paper, it just, everything kind of lines up. And so for that reason, I'm like, what we're nearly exactly 2 months away from the trade deadline. 2 months is a long time. If something doesn't get resolved by February, I will be shocked and I will be not happy. I will be very not happy. So if I had to lean anyway, I think Chicago is just, and I think Dallas really would be fond of moving into the East. I don't think they want to deal with any more, West, Houston, San Antonio. I'm not saying that either of those teams would trade for Anthony Davis, but like they're dealing with the rapid rise of those two franchises right now. And there's a lot, like, the Texas trio there's a lot of competition there. And so you don't want to just like, well, we're going to just bottom out and be the laughing stock of Texas while these other teams who we were supposed to be right there with, like there's something to that as well. I'm not saying that that's in the forefront of their minds when they're having trade negotiations, but Dallas historically is not a team that has had to, or that seems any interested in prolonging any sort of rebuild, retool. And then, when you get someone like a Cooper Flagg, it's like, okay, we're now almost where Mark Cuban was back when you got Luka, and it was like every single year matters, because every single year you have a rookie that's going from their rookie contract to then getting extended, or somebody that's coming off the books, or a material change to your financial position that you need to find a way to take advantage of. Because if you're not doing it, then you're probably being a little passive and you're letting opportunities go by to build around your star for the long term. Every single transaction cycle matters. And so that's what I want to see them take advantage of. And I think right now they have a premier opportunity, even more so if the Giannis stuff dies down, which as of right now, it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. But if Anthony Davis is the best guy available, you have to maximize on that.
Yeah. The thing that also is echoing in the back of my head, I mean, you mentioned them earlier. I do wonder if this becomes if the Bulls truly are like in a serious like pole position to go acquire Anthony Davis. I wonder what kind of competitive threat the Detroit Pistons become, because I mean they by all measures and what I'm seeing so far, they really look like they are primed to really take the East this season. I mean, we're almost a quarter in at this point. It's not a fluke. I mean,
right?
They were a solid team last season. I honestly thought they were going to upset the Knicks in the playoffs last season, and you're just seeing it really come together. And it feels like, especially as much parity as we see, and until Oklahoma City proves us wrong, there probably isn't a dynasty to be had. It's not this foregone conclusion where it's like, oh, we're going to have this for the next few seasons, or like, oh, we wait till next season. It's to me becoming like NFL parody, where it's like, you got to go all in when you got it.
Right. And to me, that I think for any fan base is exactly what you should hope for. That, like, people have all the conversations about the restrictions of the second apron and all the conversations surrounding that. But to me, every fan base should feel like they have a shot every year, or at least that we could be, we're not in this perpetual, like, man, our young stars finally get to a point where they can compete, but there's a dynasty that we have no chance. And then all of a sudden the financial picture gets complicated, and then there goes our chance, that the last chance that we've had in however many years. And so to me, the injury aspect of the conversation is obviously one that needs to get addressed, and it sounds like they're finally making some headway on. But as far as where we're at right now, the rapid ascension of Detroit, Houston, even for that matter, I think that this is I think we could be kind of entering I don't want to say a golden age, because we're getting towards the end of like LeBron stuff and all that, but like I think that this is a really interesting time right now in the league, and for everyone to feel like, man, a couple tweaks or this guy to pop, like, in our situation, it's we went from here to here. And I think that everybody should be excited about that. And so you have to be willing to go all in. You have to be willing to, part with assets that maybe you didn't want to, but you have to ask yourself, what is the end goal? And you can't just say a championship. It's yes, of course, everyone's end goal is a championship, you think, or profitability, but what do we need to do to get closer? What is driving each move? Is it financial savings? Is it, okay, we think we can compete within, 5 to 7 years, 3 to 5 years, whatever the case may be. How do we start targeting that window now? Because you can't start targeting that window in year 5 or year 6. It doesn't work like that. And so that's where I think a lot of teams get lost, especially a lot of front offices where you've had the same people for a long time. And so for now, I think, and at least in an instance like Chicago, this presents a unique opportunity for them to, hey, let's without having to give up the farm, we can add in a piece of need, a high talent, and let's see what we can do.
Yeah, it's certainly, from the outside perspective, it should be an inflection point for the Bulls. I don't know if the front office really sees it that way, because
it doesn't seem like
they move in a very, again, it's just a very myopic tunnel vision kind of space. And again, even like the whole time of this Giannis report following the Anthony Davis report, it's an interesting contrast of things, because it really makes it look like the Bulls front office had like Giannis's agent knocking on the front door of the facility. Meanwhile, AK and Eversley are sitting in some dark room haggling about, is it Zion Williams or is it AD? And Giannis is like, hey, can I just drive an hour and a half south?
Right? Exactly. But, it's going to be an interesting.
Absolutely. Lauren, I could have you on here for like hours and keep talking more and more. And if the red button gets pushed by the Mavs and the Bulls, like, have to have you back on. But thank you for a great, perfectly timed conversation about what's going on with the Mavs, but then also, Anthony Davis, who I'm sure is not gonna go away in terms of headlines and stories, especially as we're starting to get into the trade season.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. If that deal does materialize, or if another one does, because you just never know. But thank you so much for having me. I'd love to come back on anytime, and thanks for letting me ramble, because I definitely do that as well.
Absolutely. Anything you want to plug? Where can people find you? Any of that good stuff?
Yeah, no, you can find me on Twitter at the Lauren Gunn, posting my thoughts right now on everything going on with the Mavs and things going on around the league, because trade season, as you mentioned at the top, is coming up, and to me that is the most fascinating time of the year. So it's when an organization can go from the bottom maybe to middle of the pack to be at the top the next year. So you just never know. So I'll be commenting on that as we get closer and closer. But yeah, come chat.
Great stuff. Yes, everybody, please follow Lauren. She's a great follow on X, Twitter, or whatever you want to call that app these days. And I will just say once again, please thank you if you stuck with us for this episode. Like, subscribe, leave a comment. It helps us continue to grow this wonderful YouTube channel, this podcast. Thank you for rocking with Narratives Per Possession. Again, we're all about connecting you to better basketball narratives. So until next time, that's all we got here. Thank you again, Lauren.
Absolutely.